Welcome back to Hey Kentucky. So I thought it'd be good having a congressman here to talk about what's life like in Washington when the cameras aren't on. So you are actually a first-term congressman.
Right.
And so you've only been up there 3 or 4 months. Tell me about what your perception of Washington was like before, and how is it the same or different?
Well, I've been in politics for 15 years, so I kind of had basic understanding of what the legislative process would be like, kind of what politicians are really like behind the scenes. But Washington's a lot different than Frankfort. My whole life in politics has been involved in the Kentucky State Legislature, Kentucky Commissioner of Agriculture. But the personalities are very different in Washington. I'm always thinking in the back of my mind, and this guy would never get elected in Monroe County.
I can totally understand that. We always have this sort of stereotype that there's hyper-partisanship there. And it looks like on TV that everybody hates each other. Is that true?
Unfortunately, it is. And I would have thought that it wouldn't have been, because in Frankfort, after we may have a debate with the Democrats, we would go out to Longhorn or O'Charlie's and eat. And you would see
everybody would go.
You would see politicians out at night, getting along and having a big time and being cordial to one another. You never see that in Washington.
Really?
You never see that in Washington. The districts are so gerrymandered. The politicians are either very far to the right or very far to the left, and that's why it's been hard to get middle ground. It's why it's been hard to pass a budget. It's why it's hard to pass this health care bill, tax reform, because there aren't that many moderate congressmen left.
But besides the ideology, you mentioned that like people don't hang out with each other.
Right.
I heard Joe Biden talk about that when he was in the Senate, he felt like that just spending time with each other and learning that they weren't evil actually helped people get along in, say, the 80s. Do you agree that would be helpful?
It would be helpful. And when I was a freshman, we did freshman orientation with Democrats, and we tried to make a pledge to not be like the Congresses of the past and try to get along and try to reach across the aisles. And I hope that we can do that. I'm not a partisan person. I've said this throughout my entire life. I don't know the Republican Party a darn thing. I'm a registered Republican, but I'm going to vote I'm going to vote for the person, not the party. I want to represent my constituents, not my political party.
How many people do you believe, Republican or Democrat, believe what you just said?
I would say 25%.
Really?
25%.
Some on both sides?
Some on both sides, but 75% of the congressmen are hyper partisans.
Yeah. All right, well, let me ask you about President Trump. I mean, I can't remember any president that gets the amount of attention this is. Have you met him, and what is Washington like with him as president?
I actually got to spend 2 hours alone with him a month ago.
I'm sorry.
I got to fly on Air Force One all the way back from Louisville. He invited me to fly on Marine One with him, and then invited me into the White House. So,
did you? So what was that like?
It was great. It was great. I'm the demographics of a Trump voter.
Yes.
So Trump won my district by 55 points.
Yeah.
And we just hit it off. I really think he wants to make America great again. I really believe there's a window of opportunity to do some things. I don't agree with him on everything.
Do you think he got off? See, I think he got off on the wrong foot. Leave aside my political beliefs, just in general, because I don't know what you think, but Congressman, I thought since he's not really wedded to an ideology, that he could have come in and said, I'm going to take the best of what the Republicans want, the best of the Democrats, and he didn't. Do you think that was a mistake?
I do think it was a mistake, because one thing he didn't realize is there are a few Republicans that aren't going to vote for anything that he proposes, for whatever reason. No matter what. So now he's in a scenario where to get bills passed, you're going to have a few Democrat votes. And I think he burned some bridges in the beginning with some Democrats. So I'm hopeful that he's successful. He has just overwhelming support in my district and in most of Kentucky.
Yes, he does.
And it's important that we improve the business climate and we bring American jobs back to America and quit outsourcing our jobs. And I really believe that he wants to do that.
You made a point, and I believe you are one of the most sincere politicians I've ever met. Do you believe he's sincere?
I do. I do believe he's sincere. I didn't know until I spent so much time with him, and I looked him in the eye, and we had just very candid conversations. He's a funny guy. I've never been around anyone with so much energy. When I walked out of the White House, it was midnight, and he was still going strong. And his staff said he only sleeps 3 or 4 hours a day. So this guy has energy. He has a work ethic. He really wants to get things done. And he's doing it in a different way. And, it's been hard for the politicians in Washington to adjust and adapt to the Trump culture. But I believe that...
Is that a culture that can work?
It's a culture that can work. It's just so different. You have so many established career politicians in Washington that just scratching their head every minute when they see him. But his cabinet secretaries are getting settled in. They're very pro-business. Most of them are very credible. There are one or two that are on the weaker side probably, but for the most part, his cabinet secretaries are doing a good job. Rex Tillerson's doing a good job as Secretary of State. So I believe that he'll be successful, and I think he's learned a lot of lessons. Politics doesn't work like the private sector.
No, it doesn't.
And he learned that real quick.
Let me ask you just kind of a final question. If you were going to make one or two structural changes that you think would actually make Washington a better place, leave aside policy, just structural, to make it where it doesn't seem like such a gridlock, nasty place, what would you do?
Term limits. I support term limits and some form of campaign finance reform. We have C4s that are political action committees that you don't have to disclose who your donors are. I had in the governor's race a bunch of negative TV ads run against me. I didn't know who was funding them. I think I knew. I think he was a candidate for governor, but that's another story for another day. But you should, at the very least, have to disclose who your donors are. That would solve a lot of the problems. And these Republicans, Democrats come out of these hard-fought races bitter. And they're mad at the other party, and they don't want to get along. And it's hard to work.
So that's not something a lot of Republicans would say, campaign finance, but you do think that would be helpful?
I think you at least need to know when you see a commercial on TV that's ripping your candidate, who's paying for it? Where's that money coming from?
I don't know how people would disagree with that, honestly. But, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about other issues and a lot more with Congressman Comer. This is Hey Kentucky.